Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Newsroom. I'm Joey Taylor. Now, Inside the Newsroom is where we bring you the trending or important stories of the KELOLAND area, and we bring in our newsroom staff members to the digital desk to talk about these stories. These are the same ones you're seeing every day on our newscast and at KELOLAND.com. First, we're going to talk about a Sioux Falls murder trial that is currently underway. It's a case that involves mental health, substance abuse, and an admission from the defendant of taking someone's life. Dylan Farmer stands accused of killing Casey Schaefer in September of 2024. He has pleaded not guilty to both first and second-degree murder charges. Dan Santella has more from what happened during opening statements.
The prosecution told the seated jury that defendant Dylan Farmer had gone to the Minnehaha County Jail and stated he witnessed a murder. In court filings, Farmer accuses Casey Schaefer of being a pedophile, with Farmer stating, quote, "I heard he touched a kid, so I shot him." And this is how the prosecution today said it will ask the jury to evaluate this case, that Farmer shot Schaefer because he believed Schaefer was a pedophile. The defense described Farmer as a, quote, "scared, homeless, highly intoxicated man asking for help." The defense says Farmer was concerned for his own safety and had wanted to go into custody. The defense raises a couple linked questions. When was Farmer high, and what had he said when he was under the influence? The jurors today were brought back to the 2024 scene through footage produced by responding officers' body-worn cameras. A bloody Schaefer was visible on the floor of an apartment. A woman who lived there testified in court today that she had spent time in a relationship of some kind with both Schaefer and Farmer. The woman says she believed her son had suffered sexual abuse and thought Schaefer had raped her child. The jury learned today that Schaefer had denied touching the woman's child. Court papers say Farmer and the woman had had, quote, "several phone calls on the day he was shot." But the woman told the jury today that she and Farmer had discussed no plan about Schaefer. She says she never asked Farmer to kill Schaefer, and Farmer never said to her that he killed Schaefer.
All right, and we're going to bring in Dan right now. Dan, thank you for joining us. What other information can you tell us about the trial at this time?
Prosecution said this trial will have 30 witnesses, or more than 30 is how they phrased it. So we anticipate, a considerable amount of information for the jury to go over. As I believe it was the prosecution yesterday during its opening statement said, there's a lot going on here, and a lot of different people and a lot of different components that the jury will have to consider as they look at those murder charges against Dylan Farmer.
Yeah, and some of those things are kind of, like we've mentioned, both in your online article and in your story, but mental health and homelessness, and they're both big focuses. Can you talk to me a little bit about how they're big focuses in this case?
Well, the defense in its opening statements had talked about how this was a man concerned for his own safety. In testimony yesterday, I believe in the opening statements, there was no hint or secret that this is someone who has struggled with substance abuse concerns, and the defense raised the question, okay, when was he high, and how might that have impacted what he had said, at different times, the mental health, the mental fragility, the concern for safety, all part of this defendant and his story. Of course, we didn't hear from the defendant in the trial yesterday. He was sitting right there. But the defense talked about his vulnerable mental state.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it just right there, not kind of, you did mention that the prosecution said during opening statements they are anticipating having more than 30 witnesses in this case. Do we have an estimate on how long this trial might go for?
I chatted in a break yesterday with one of the prosecutors, and he's guesstimated 7 or 8 days. That could change. There's a lot of variables going on, but that was his rough estimation. Yesterday, Monday, we had the opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. We heard a lot of testimony from someone who knew both the deceased and the accused. We heard from law enforcement as well, and that was, several hours over that. I believe it started at 8:30 yesterday morning at the Minnehaha County Courthouse, and then I had to leave at 3:15 or so, just because I needed to get a story ready for our 6 o'clock newscast, and I had to anchor our 5 o'clock show too. Our colleague Michael Dorn is in the courtroom today. So it's a lot of different things. It's processing court papers, looking back at the case. Of course, we had covered it before. What are the big components of it? What are the big concerns with it? Looking back, where did this take place? And it was a September 2024 death. And then, in processing an ongoing court case to take a lot of notes pretty quickly in the courtroom. And it's a unique kind of reporting because you're not doing interviews per se. You're just processing all the information that is often being stated pretty rapidly. Yesterday gave me an appreciation once again for court reporters who have to type so quickly and so accurately and just rapid fire as everyone is giving out information. So, well, that's impressive. So yeah, a lot of note taking, and then as you're putting the stories together, reviewing all your pages and notes, what's the best way to present, in a relatively brief amount of time, given the hours of testimony,
Right.
For our viewers and readers.
Yeah. So when it comes to murder trials, or this trial even specifically, is there anything that maybe we haven't gotten to mention that's important for the public to know?
Not especially, just that, it's going to be, all signs point to it being several days and a lot of different components of this as the jury weighs what to do. So, the opening statements are done, but much still remains, and we'll see how that comes to fruition.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dan. And folks, we're going to be sure to follow this case both on air and online. Like Dan mentioned, we do have our reporter Michael Dorn in the courtroom today, and we will be right back after the break. Welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. This week, a former daycare employee pleaded guilty to child abuse. Authorities arrested Chelsea Struess last April. She was eventually charged with 18 counts of felony child abuse, and the crimes took place at Next Gen Kids Daycare on South Cliff Avenue. Sydney Hoyer sat down with a mother of one of the alleged victims and joins us with this story.
Chelsea Struess was charged with abusing 7 toddlers while working at Next Gen Kids Daycare. Today, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of child abuse. One of the victim's moms watched surveillance video shortly after Struess's arrest.
I immediately left work. I raced over to the daycare and they showed us a video where it was 10 minutes long of Chelsea abusing several children, not just one.
In court today, a prosecutor said Struess could be seen picking up a child by the arm and holding them in midair. She then dropped the child to the ground. The state also said that Struess was seen striking another child in the back of the head to get the child to lay down. Following today's guilty plea, parents say they wish there was more they could do. The father of another victim told us he would like Struess to get at least 1 year behind bars for each child she's accused of abusing.
I feel powerless. There's nothing that I know I can do. I know that, unfortunately, a lot of the times our system fails, especially with our kids, and it's really hard to feel heard or seen.
Even after the case wraps up, Amix says she and her daughter will still have a lot of healing to do.
I wasn't expecting to be this anxious and be, I cried when they were reading, when they said the word torture, abuse, those were very strong words.
And Sydney joins us now. Sydney, do we know a sentencing date at this time?
We do not have a sentencing date yet. So since the plea was just yesterday, they kind of have some other things to get sorted out, but we will definitely be updating when we find that out.
All right. And are there any other details we know on the case at this time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, in the documents. There's, like they said, 7 kids that she was accused of abusing, and it's been cut down to just 3 of those 18 counts. So there is a lot more information about, what happened to these kids, but that's all kind of something that's been swept under the rug now just because of this plea deal.
Well, and in your story, you mentioned how parents kind of wished there was more they can do. Can you expand a little bit more on what they told you?
Yeah, so they were just, I talked to this mom as well as a dad off camera, and they just kind of felt worried, now about leaving their kids in childcare now that this had happened. The dad I spoke to said he kind of had a hard time finding a childcare he trusted. So did the mom. She said she brought her child to a daycare that she had formerly worked at because she knew the people. And so I think this just really affected their trust a lot.
Well, and daycares are a place parents take their children and really expect them to be taken care of. That's kind of, as parents, what we do. I'm a mom, so of course, I have a little stronger tie to this story. But what resources in South Dakota do parents have to make sure their kids are safe?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the Department of Social Services website, they list out all of the childcare in South Dakota. Make sure they're licensed. They have all the right. They've gone through all the right steps to make sure that they are should be a trusted daycare provider.
And can you talk to me just a little bit about maybe the importance for parents in making sure, they're finding a licensed facility or going to, DSS's website or childcare.gov, any of these resources?
Yeah, I mean, just looking into even, I mean, in this case, this daycare was licensed and had all those correct things going on, but they just had one worker who happened to not be following those rules or the laws, in fact. And so, even just maybe looking through reviews might be a good idea to kind of see has anyone had an issue with this place or with any specific employees, which I think is something probably a lot of parents are wanting to do anyway when looking for such an important thing for their child.
Right, and I would completely agree with you there on that. And then my next question for you is, so she took a plea deal, is that correct?
Yes.
And do we know a little more on what that really was saying at all?
Yeah, so basically there were three different counts of 1 through 18. Three of those were basically chosen that she would say she would plead guilty to those so that she wouldn't have to, say, go to trial for all 18 of them. And so those three, they kind of described what each of those counts were. One was picking up a child by the arm and dropping them on the floor. Another was hitting a kid's head into the ground. So there were just three specific instances that were picked out of 18 that actually were seen on camera and happened.
And with this, you spoke to parents who obviously are going to be very emotional. What was the atmosphere like when you were talking to them?
Yeah, I mean, they were very upset, of course. I mean, something terrible happened to their kids. Their kids were victims, and at the age of, I mean, 1, they were less than 2 when this happened to them. And both of them said that, now their kids sometimes have a hard time going to daycare or preschool, or they are really clingy to them, or just kind of have some more trust issues because of these events.
And so when it comes to this case, is there anything really important for viewers or for the public to know involving this story, involving the plea deal, involving, the parents, the alleged victims, anything like that?
Yeah, I would just say that I know the parents kind of said they almost saw what they could see as some warning signs where their kids maybe didn't want to go as much when this alleged abuse was happening, and they didn't trust their gut in that instance, and they kind of wish they had looked closer into it or maybe reported something sooner. But I mean, I think it's always a good idea just to trust your gut instinct and maybe go after those concerns that you're having.
Perfect. Well, and folks, I do want to bring up just this QR code really quick for you. This you can scan and you can find Sydney's story online on KELOLAND.com, where I know she has more details listed. Again, it's going to pop up right there. Scan the QR code and go to KELOLAND.com. It's where we're going to have all of our stories listed and posted for you. Sydney, thank you so much for joining us and for your insight on this. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back, and we are going to be talking about football. So we're going to take a break from some of the heavier news that we've been covering, and we're going to talk about a Super Bowl win, how one football player is inspiring local athletes here in the KELOLAND viewing area, as well as a college that is making a shift. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Inside the Newsroom. Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. As we've been talking about since Sunday evening, a Pierre native is now a Super Bowl champion. Gray Zabel and the Seattle Seahawks won 29-13 against the New England Patriots. Sorry for the spoiler alert if you didn't watch the game, but Zabel, the rookie guard's success is inspiring football players at his former high school. Kelly Volk has the story.
South Dakota's capital city is still buzzing about Zabel and the Seahawks' Super Bowl success.
You still see 76 jerseys all over town.
Pierre Jr. Cooper Terwilliger plays football for the Governors, Zabel's high school team. Watching the Pierre native's football journey and Super Bowl win is inspiring for Terwilliger.
You see him, all the hard work that he's put in throughout his years, it being accomplished and it being shown off at the highest level.
Other players on the team, including sophomore Jaron Deal, also feel that inspiration.
It inspires me a lot to just put in the work, and my goal is also to play college football like he did.
Terwilliger also wants to compete at the college level. Zabel's success is an example of the possibilities.
I was at his draft party this last year to see him get drafted in the first round. And then for him to go on and have an amazing year that he did and win a Super Bowl, it's something cool that you can see, because a guy, that grew up in the same environment as you, that's a guy that's just like me in a way, do amazing things on the football field. It kind of just shows you that it can be done.
All right, Kelly's going to join us now. Kelly, thank you so much for being here. First, talk to me what it was like talking to high schoolers that are really looking up to Zabel.
Well, it was a pleasure to speak with them. That's one of the angles we haven't done yet, because we have been following the story for quite a while now, and we've talked to his parents, we've talked to a former coach, we've talked to business owners hosting watch parties. So this was an angle we hadn't done yet, and both of the boys in the story were great.
And for you, what was maybe, like you mentioned, we've been covering this story here at KELOLAND, multiple different angles. What was it like to be able to approach this from a different point of view?
It's always interesting to find a new angle to a story. And in this case, it was really interesting to hear what some high schoolers had to say. As you could see, they do admire him, and they hope to head down his path and compete at the college level.
Well, and if I'm correct, he played at NDSU, correct?
Yes.
And so NDSU also has some changes coming to their football program.
Yeah. So they are moving from the SCS to the FBS. So that has certainly been a talker in the news this week as well.
Yeah, I won't ask you too much on that because I know we have Ray Yost coming in a little bit later to talk to us more on that. I just wanted to make sure I was correct with my football players, because college football is one of those things. Sometimes I get a little confused on that.
Well, that's not a problem. I'm here to help you out with it.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us. Folks, stick with us, because after the break, again, we're going to talk about that NDSU football recent announcement that Kelly mentioned. We're going to be right back. You're watching Inside the Newsroom. Welcome back. Now, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, the North Dakota State University Bison football team will join the Mountain West Conference for football this fall at the FBS level. Now, our digital reporter Ray Yost put together this story on KELOLAND.com. She joins us now. Ray, first, for people who maybe don't know what the difference between FBS level and the FCS level at which they are playing at now, what's the difference there?
Yeah, sure. So the FCS is a tier of Division I, and FBS is the upper tier of Division I football. So each have their own championships, like the FCS. South Dakota State, NDSU, are among those teams that have won championships at the FCS level. The FBS is, if you think of the real power conferences, you think of Alabama, you think of Michigan, you think of Ohio State. Those are in the FBS, which is considered the upper level.
And This isn't a cheap move. Is that correct?
No, and I think cheap or inexpensive or expensive is a little subjective, but I think if you look at $17.5 million to make this move, at least $17.5 million, $5 million is the fee the NCAA requires to make the move. And then the Mountain West Conference itself is got a $12.5 million entrance fee.
Now, is this for all sports or is this just for football?
This is just for football. And I listened to a news conference yesterday with NDSU officials who want to stress that the Summit League is a really competitive, really good premier league at the Division I level for basketball, baseball, and other sports. So they're very happy with that. It allows them to maintain some of those, in North Dakota rivalries as well as South Dakota and other areas that the fans have grown to love too. So it's just football.
And so how does this really impact, we see them playing on the screen right now, how does this impact any South Dakota, North Dakota rivalry games, or do we not know that right now?
Well, the indications are, I think the indications are, the marker game between North Dakota State and SDSU won't happen. Now, during the news conference, NDSU said it was open to some FCS opponents. But I don't think you're going to see the traditional games that we've seen between, SDSU or NDSU. They may play one someday. Could be that they play USD. I think those are remain to be seen if you can get those on a schedule. It could be another FCS opponent that maybe they could play in another state. So it seems unlikely that those rivalry games would be a consistent game on the schedules going forward.
All right, and kind of last question for you. When we're just talking about Mountain West football and the conference, are there any other changes they're seeing right now?
Yeah, the Mountain West for a long time was home to Boise State, for example, and Fresno State, and they're looking to join, which is kind of the new reconfigured Pac-10. Not looking, they will join this fall. And then with some of the changes coming in with NDSU, Northern Illinois, for example, will be joining the Mountain West as well. So that, conference is going through some of its own changes, which is kind of really part of the college football landscape right now.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And folks, that is all the time we have for today on Inside the Newsroom. Make sure to join us every day at 1 p.m. weekday, that is. Until the next time, have a great day, everyone.